Joining me now is Gregory Wrightstone, Executive Director of the CO2 Coalition, also author of best-selling book Inconvenient Facts. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Oh, pleasure to be on with you. Yeah, as we'll talk in a little bit, we just are publishing a new Midwest and climate change publication that your viewers will want to peruse. But we can talk about that on another broadcast.
Yeah, and we will put that out there in the days or week to come. But I want to get your reaction really quick on something that caught my attention, and it caught people here at the Mackinac Center's attention. This from the Washington Post, quote, "This July 4th was hot, Earth's hottest day on record, in fact." And it goes on to say the hottest day in 125,000 years. What's your take when you see this?
Yeah, I immediately my detector went off for misinformation, and we took a look at. I knew that this was just wrong because I'm pretty well versed on paleoclimate data going back thousands of years. And I knew it was wrong because if we look at the past, just really the last 5,000 years of going back to the first great civilizations, we know that the past warming periods were warmer than today based on historical data. For example, in the Minoan warm period, this was the time of the great civilizations, the Hittites, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the first great empires of the Harappan Empire in the Indus River Valley. It was a time of great warming, and we know that, for example, they were growing a crop called millet in Scandinavia. You can't, it's only grown in semi-tropical areas. It was a lot warmer. Or during the medieval warm period, we know the Vikings were growing barley on Greenland, and you can't grow barley on Greenland now because it's too cold today. So just using historical data instead of paleoclimatological isotope comparisons, we know it was warmer from these historical data. Where were vineyards being grown during those times? Much farther north. Olive groves much farther north than they can be grown today. And I like
Oh,
using this historical data. So what they did here,
yeah.
they took the temperature record or satellite data, actually goes back to 1979. The thermometer data record goes to 1850. They looked at what they said going back thousands of years. They looked at tree ring data, which is historically highly flawed. Uh, and they're using, and it's there's Dr. Michael Mann who made the famous hockey stick. He also used the tree ring data because it showed what he wanted: unusual warming in the 20th century. When it's actually proven that it wasn't warming that was driving tree growth; it was increased CO2 from CO2 fertilization effect. So they get this all wrong. And so I went back. We looked at uh, the United States Historical Climate Network for temperature data in the United States, and they said July 4th was the hottest temperature for hundreds of thousands of years.
Yep.
Well, I said, well, if that's the case, it should have been warming over the last, what, 100 years? So we
You would
took this
think.
data. This is from NOAA. It's called the Historical Climatology Network data. We went back to 1895 to look at, okay, we looked at July 4th temperature data from 1895. No, we didn't have 2023 in the data. They don't have that in there yet. So I went to 2022. It showed a slight decline. So we looked at average maximum temperature. This is for the lower 48 states. It's not global, but it's lower 48, which is pretty representative of the planet, pretty big area. And we had a slight decline from 1895 to 2022. Certainly no increase. We also looked at the number of the stations. There are 1,100 plus stations across the United States. What was a percentage of stations that reached 100 degrees Fahrenheit?
Yeah.
Those also were in decline from 1895 until recently. So we see no increase of temperature really. What we do see is an increase in nighttime temperature, which is actually, and which is true. Um, but that's a benefit, isn't it? Think about it. You're in Michigan, you'd like to have nighttime temperatures another 2 or 3 degrees higher.
Oh yeah.
Uh, yeah, I mean, it gets pretty cold. Also,
Yeah.
what does that mean? That's great for agriculture. If you have
Yeah.
nighttime temperatures increasing, that means that you have fewer killing frosts. The killing frosts stop earlier in the spring and arrive later in the fall. So your cherry orchards, your apple orchards, they don't get hurt by these late spring frosts. So these are all benefits. We have longer growing seasons, and the longer growing seasons are turbocharged with plant growth and crop growth by more CO2. So it's I just shake my head at some of these things, but they make the claim and everyone spins it. Uh, they don't look at actually the data that we see. The other thing I just researched for my next book that's this close to being done. Uh, I looked at if you used it a year ago, if you looked at the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, their chart on heat waves, it would
Okay.
show it goes back to 1895, and it showed a giant spike of heat waves in the 1920s and 30s, and then it's been declining and low ever since. That's been replaced by another chart that started in 1961, showing every 10 years of data showing a great increase in heat waves. Well, I looked at that and I said, this is, I know it's not right. And I had to go back into the deep data. Where did they get the data? And how did they do it? You know what I found? It wasn't heat waves in the United States. It was heat waves in the 50 largest metropolitan areas of the United States. Now you know a little bit about global warming and climate change. What's the temperature been doing in the urban areas? It's been increasing because of what's called the urban heat island effect. It's a well recognized, and they actually stated deep in the bowels of how they describe their data for this new heat wave index that it could be that the urban heat island effects has influenced this data set. You think? If you look at heat wave data outside of the urban areas, you don't see that increase. And that's how they play a game of statistical manipulation of the data. They start with a solution and then come up with an idea how can we fit the data to this. It's it's malfeasance,
And
scientific
it
malfeasance to do this.
and it's doing. You look at this headline here, and it's a disservice to the average person who reads this, and many people I should don't read beyond the headlines. And it's really a disservice to their readers or the viewers because they're not giving them a critical look at all of the information, right? It's a sad state of affairs when you see something like this. It really is a disservice.
It is. And we saw the same thing last 2 weeks in Texas. They had a heat wave. It's summer, it's Texas, and it's hot. There's nothing unusual, nothing unprecedented. It was uncomfortably hot. But again, we did the same thing, specific data for Texas. We looked at showing that actually heat waves and degrees 100-degree Fahrenheit have been in decline in Texas. Uh, and they just don't. They're doing this to instill a climate of fear in the population. Why else would we voluntarily enact economically punishing and crippling taxation schemes? Why would we restrict what vehicles we can drive, how much water comes out of our shower, what stoves, washing machines, you name it? Why would we voluntarily restrict our freedom of choice for all these things? I'll tell you why. Fear is a great motivator. And fear and hunger are the two of the best motivators. And so what do they need to do for us to voluntarily and gladly accept all these restrictions? Create a climate of fear, a climate generated by deception. And that's what we do at the CO2 Coalition. We're the preeminent scientific organization in the world pushing back against this false notion of man-made catastrophic warming. We just added to our board of directors Dr. John Clauser, 2022. You've never heard of him, but you're about to. He was the 2022 Nobel laureate in physics. he was invited to the White House 2 months ago and to be honored along with the other American Nobel laureates. And he told Joe Biden at the end, when he got in the line to shake his hand, he told Joe Biden, your science on energy and climate is wrong. Joe Biden got angry, as Joe Biden often does. And he told Dr. Clauser, he said, that's just right-wing science, is what he told. Biden's lecturing the Nobel laureate in physics on science. And no, Dr. Clauser has it right. He further stated that there is no climate crisis. And we agree with that. We see an Earth that's thriving and prospering, and humanity's benefiting from modest warming and more CO2. And we should celebrate that.
And last question, our goal as organizations such as yourself and ours, it's about getting the message out, because like you said, if someone sits down, spends even 5 minutes with you or watches this video and puts any, biases aside and just critical thinking and listens, it'll be obvious, it seems like.
They need to shut us up. They need to stifle me. And we just, with the new focus group work, we just finished up. I went through review yesterday. What we found was our messaging at the beginning, prior to what we went through our messaging, 14% of the people believe that CO2 could be beneficial. Afterwards, 56%. So what we found here was, when people actually see the truth, when they see the facts, they can be influenced and moved. And I think the other side knows that. And that's why they're going great guns to stifle people like me, Dr. Clauser, the CO2 Coalition. Because if we're allowed to speak, people go, huh, I didn't know that. Isn't that interesting? And we stick to the science, and we're very proud of that.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. We're going to have you on again to talk much more, and I really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you very much.